Another day, another story with your friendly AI lawyer. Facts. The case involves the controversy of whether former Philippine President Ferdinand E. Marcos and his family have the right to return to the Philippines after being deposed from the presidency and forced into exile in 1986. Petitioners argue that the president does not have the power to bar their return, citing constitutional rights to liberty of abode and travel. The respondents argue that the issue involves a political question of national security and public safety, and that the president has the power to prohibit their return. The right to return to one's country is a distinct right under international law, separate from the right to travel. While the right to travel is not specifically guaranteed in the Bill of Rights, the right to return may be considered a generally accepted principle of international law and is part of the law of the land under the Philippine Constitution. The Supreme Court takes a two-tiered approach to resolve the issue, first determining the president's power under the Constitution and then determining whether the president acted arbitrarily or with grave abuse of discretion. Issues. 1. Whether the president has the power to bar the Marcoses from returning to the Philippines. 2. Whether the president acted arbitrarily or with grave abuse of discretion in barring the Marcoses' return. 3. Whether the issue raised is a political question. 4. Whether there is a clear and present danger to national security and public safety that would justify the ban on the Marcos family's return. 5. Whether the failure of Congress to enact a statute defining the parameters of the right to travel and to freely choose one's abode has constrained the president to fill in the vacuum. Ruling. The Supreme Court dismisses the petition seeking to allow the return of former Philippine President Marcos and his family, citing the serious threat to national interest and welfare posed by their return. The court acknowledges the existence of certain powers granted to the executive branch in times of crisis or national emergency, and states that the power of the president to allow or disallow the Marcoses' return should be viewed in this context. The court also cites various destabilizing incidents that occurred after the People's Power Revolution, which could be emboldened by the Marcoses' return. One justice dissents, arguing that the issue was one of rights and not power, and that the indefinite suspension of the constitutional right to travel was not justified. In a subsequent ruling, the Supreme Court of the Philippines has ruled that former President Ferdinand Marcos has the constitutional right to return to the Philippines, despite the government's ban on his return. The court finds that the government's reasons for the ban, including national security and public safety concerns, were too generic and sweeping to serve as grounds for the denial of a constitutional right. The court also rejects the government's argument that the failure of Congress to enact a statute defining the parameters of the right to travel and to freely choose one's abode has constrained the president to fill in the vacuum. Discussion on legal doctrines applied. The case involves the balance between individual rights and the state's duty to protect its citizens, particularly in the context of the president's executive power. The Constitution provides for a separation of powers among the three branches of government, with the executive power vested in the president. While the Constitution imposes limitations on the exercise of specific powers of the president, it maintains what is traditionally considered within the scope of executive power. The President of the Republic of the Philippines must consider principles such as service and protection of the people, maintenance of peace and order, protection of life, liberty, and property, and promotion of the general welfare when making decisions. The President has the obligation to protect the people, promote their welfare, and advance the national interest. The Constitution is a social contract whereby the people have surrendered their sovereign powers to the state for the common good. The president has the power to bar the Marcoses from returning to the Philippines if it is in the national interest. The right to return to one's country is a distinct right under international law, separate from the right to travel. While the right to travel is not specifically guaranteed in the Bill of Rights, the right to return may be considered a generally accepted principle of international law and is part of the law of the land under the Philippine Constitution. The court has the duty to determine whether there has been a grave abuse of discretion on the part of any branch or instrumentality of the government. The president cannot shirk from the responsibility of protecting the people and preserving the state. The majority argues that the president has the power to deny a citizen their right to travel, based on American precedents and the president's duty to protect the general welfare of the people. However, the dissenting opinion argues that the Bill of Rights must take precedence over the president's implied powers, and that there is no evidence to suggest that the return of the Marcoses would pose a threat to national security. The dissenting opinion also emphasizes the importance of upholding human rights and due process, and argues that mandamus should be granted. In the end, the court grants the petition, allowing Marcos to return to the Philippines. The decision is seen as a setback for human rights in the country, as it emphasizes the importance of individual rights and limits on executive power. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to my channel.